for coming. We'll call the meeting to order. We need to do a roll call, Julie?
I will do a roll call so that anybody watching would know that everybody's here.
Okay.
Okay. Supervisor Wolf?
Here.
Supervisor Graybaum?
Here.
Supervisor Haas?
Here.
Supervisor Henricks?
Here.
Supervisor Marchese?
Here.
Everyone's here.
We're going for a record perfect attendance so far this term. We've been properly noticed?
Yes, we have.
Okay. Any public comments or correspondence communications? None that we know of? Okay. The minutes of the June 18th meeting. Do we have a motion to accept those?
After reading them, I move to approve the minutes. Second.
We're moved and seconded to approve the minutes of our last meeting of June 18th. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Chairman Wolf, could you please announce who makes the motions? So that everybody.
Yes, so you
We
can,
have
okay.
to kind of get into this because we have this continuing.
So the motion was made by Supervisor Graybaum and seconded by Supervisor Haas. And the motion carried unanimously. So number 5 on our agenda is facilities management. And we have an action item. Mr. Edgecraft.
This one looks very familiar to you because last month the Ascension Columbia St. Mary's came in and requested a name change from the Columbia St. Mary's Center to the Ascension Columbia St. Mary's Center. Then somehow there was lack of discussion with their marketing department, and their marketing department came back and said for their branding they don't like anything just ending in center, they want an adjective with it. So they came back and requested instead if it could be the Ascension Columbia St. Mary's Expo Center. From my standpoint, I would recommend approval.
I'll make a motion to approve, or make a motion for the name change to Ascension Columbia St. Mary's Expo Center.
Second by Henricks.
Okay. Been moved by Supervisor Haas and seconded by Supervisor Henricks that we approve this name change request. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Number 2.
A proposal for the Justice Center masonry repair. And before I go any further, I should have introduced this good-looking guy to my left. This is Gerard Balin, our building superintendent. He covers the Justice Center, the Fairgrounds, as well as the Advocates House. And so he's here this morning to answer any questions on the Justice Center masonry repair. As spring has been going on, we obviously had some early discussions, especially with administration and finance, that with coronavirus and unsure where expenses would be, we've been trying to hold off on some of the larger projects, and if we don't need to. However, we have had a number of issues where we're having water weeping in, where we believe that flashing was installed improperly. Last year, we had a specialty contract come in, Masonry Restoration Incorporated, where what they do is instead of actually just simply demolishing a wall and rebuilding it, they're able to remove individual bricks on a top layer, have spacers set, and then install a flashing behind that through that opening. And so we did that on a small section, I believe it was last year, at the end of last year. It worked successfully, and so they came back and checked a number of other places. They said we certainly could look to do just a tuck pointing and caulking for about $8,000, or we could attempt to do this through the wall flashing installation, along with the tuck pointing and caulking, and that would be about $32,000. This is part of our operations budget, but we, as a larger contract, we certainly wanted to bring it in front of the committee. Gerard, would you have anything you wanted to add about that?
Only that I would recommend the hire because of we've had water infiltration. The tuck pointing and the caulking, though sealing the brick in the contract, water is going to get in there, and by taking the concrete block face brick off, they can treat the metal lintels above the windows and stuff, which would be very difficult to do without removing that. And this is the permanent fix for it.
And you did do this exact fix last year, was it?
We did it earlier this spring, on the northwest corner, and we have not had any leaking there. They did a very good job. These people work closely with our roofing consultant, not the contractor, but they came in, the guy was very knowledgeable. I was impressed. He told me what was in the building without even looking at the prints. The flashing that's in there is, it almost looks like a tar paper type membrane that when the brick and the block move in, as stuff does. And then in the contract it says that this material you can't end dam. So what happens is that it's just flush on the end, where the stainless steel, they can almost make a tray out of it as they put it in there, and it's forced to be weeped out the front of the building, the outside of the building instead of inward.
Very good explanation, helpful. How much was done already? You know, did you do 10 feet and this is 100 feet now, or you know, what, relative to what we're talking about here, how much have you done already?
We did 80 feet already, and this one here, though different because of where it is on the building, this will be 150 feet plus the item 6, which is just needed for caulking and tuck pointing, would be an extra 20 to 25 feet.
And you guys feel that relative to the first go-around, this is a fair and, you know, equitable number for the place to put it?
I believe it is, yes.
Very good. Tom?
Only question I have is, how come area 5 you don't have to do the tuck through the wall flashing installation?
That is above a air handler intake, and either side of that has not been compromised, but the thought is that over that intake, it's actually not over the intake, but it's around that intake that we're pulling water in when we're pulling the air in, and we've got to just divert that there.
I was just looking at the mobilization fee. I mean, it's only $750 to do everything, and I just thought, well, then you finish the project and do all. No, understood. I'm tired of us paying double for somebody to come back again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you know that my last assignment was on the Public Safety Committee, and the issue of leakage from the roof into the walls was a major concern of the employees in Clerk of Courts. And several times there were discussions about fears that actual mold was growing.
Yep.
And so, well, there's two things. I would strongly support the more expensive option because it looks like it's worked. The other thing, I guess, what I'm concerned about is, do we know if this is all-inclusive? I mean, I understand walls move and the two masonry move and the lentils, I understand that, but I just am concerned that if that leakage continues and we continue to have problems with our employees in Clerk of Courts, I mean, so what I guess I'm asking is, if we approve the more expensive one, will that solve, I'm just going to use a number, 80% or 90% of the problem?
All of the flashing installed presently was done at the same time. So it's, what we know of it, we know that there's been improvements in technology, and that some of the material has failed. Not being in the wall, obviously, we don't know where that has happened. Our problems tend to be facing north and west, where we have more of the driving winds. So that being said, this is where we found the problem, but I would not say that, you know, I or someone else is not gonna be coming back to this committee within the next 2 to 5 years and saying, there's another 150 feet here or 80 feet there that may need to be done, just because of the history of what it is. Well, right now, we're addressing the problem areas where we know it's manifested itself within the building.
Yeah, I'm just thinking maybe, I mean, we know this is a problem, it's the way walls work. Yeah, but I'm wondering, should we do the whole building? Or should we look at it? I mean, if you would hear the employees of the clerk of courts, they are really troubled by this because it's their work environment.
But just to be clear, we tested everything. We tested, there's no mold, there's no air loss.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, it was all tested, all clear.
When? It was several years ago, but we did have a indoor air quality.
There were concerns, but they were unfounded. And we unfounded them.
Yeah, what I would say, Pat, is
By checking the environment.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I did not know that piece of information.
what I was gonna say, Pat, real quick,
The
is,
clerk of courts may still have concerns. But we did the analysis that the environment is safe.
what I was gonna say, Pat, is sorry for interrupting, was really, to me, I kind of combine your comments with Tom's comments in that, you know, there is a sense that it makes sense to say, hey, we don't want to keep paying a mobilization fee to keep doing it. I think from my standpoint, the cost to do this type of work, we really should be focusing more on where we've had the issues and where we continue to have the issues. As Gerard said, it really is coming from the north and from the west, where just that's the propensity for the driving rain to come in and push through. And so from my standpoint, it wouldn't be worth the expense. Now again, he's right. We could be coming back in 2 years going, okay, we're having issues on the east and now we're paying another mobilization fee. But that's another, $1,000 mobilization fee versus paying now $10, $20, $30, $40,000 to do this additional flashing that may or may not be needed. That's where my recommendation would be to stay with the higher bid as I agree with, but that we wouldn't go any farther at this point.
Thank you very much. Very helpful.
Any other discussion? Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the project, specifically I would say, can I just say the more expensive approach of $32,000?
I think we could.
For me.
So the motion has been made to, tell me if this is consistent, Supervisor Marchese, to accept the proposal for the Justice Center masonry repair, to do the through-wall flashing installation, tuck pointing and caulking in the amount of $32,335.
Perfect, thank you.
$32,355. Motion made by Supervisor Marchese. Second by Supervisor Henricks. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I look forward to working with you.
Hang on one second, you're not gonna be going long.
Get off that.
Facilities financial reports, if there are any questions, otherwise on the back Public Works report, we'll get to later, but I would point out that there were just a couple things. I gave authority, the Fair Board, which meets out of the pavilion, was having some issues with Wi-Fi. They wanted to put a small antenna up on our, now named Ascension Columbia St. Mary's Expo Center. Rolls right off the tongue. And I gave them authority to go ahead and put that antenna up, just wanted to let you know. And then also there were two questions from Supervisor Wolf at the last meeting in regards to the facility budget line items. One of them was an other revenue for $32,000. That was in essence a Advocates House grant, because Advocates House is officially ours, but sometimes they get grants. The way we work those systems is they will get a grant, deposit it with us, then we will hire the contractors and or perform the work. And then there was a second question in regards to a capital outlay cost for $18,000, and that was expenses in regards to the administration center's camera and security upgrades. that was something approved by the board. Those are expenses then that would get applied to the administration center, and then when that project is done, revenues from the general fund, finance basically shifts funds over to cover those within the administration center. Any other questions on facilities?
I'm just curious on the fairgrounds.
Sure.
Financial, is there any impact, positive or negative, to the fair being scaled back, not really happening, or?
There's no impact on our, we have no financial interest in the fair operations.
Well, there's a little bit in that. The fair board does pay us, or the Justice Center budget pays us a little bit we do some calcium chloride of the gravel to try to keep it. Really, the biggest impact right now, I would probably just say, is the lack of events out there. Now, again, the less events we have out there, the less staffing time we're putting people out there to clean up and that type of thing.
And that might be, usually we staff a little higher during the fair. We're cleaning some of the bathrooms and things, so.
Thanks. Thank you, Gerard.
Thank you. Have a good day. Be safe.
You too. Okay, on to item number 6, transit services.
The only thing here is just a transit merger status update, and Supervisor Wolf, I'd kind of let you talk a little bit about some discussions that you've had in regards to this and the meeting we had with Joey Nielsen.
We, as you know, in our last meeting, we talked about having a meeting to discuss this item and try to get things off of square one and moving forward. We did have that meeting on July 6th. Joy, our transit superintendent, joined us. John was there. I could only invite one member of the committee to avoid our quorum meeting issues, so I invited our member with the most public works experience, Supervisor Marchese, to help me out as rookie in this endeavor, and we had a very productive meeting. We talked about, again, the 4 alternatives, which John very well laid out for us. Option 1, do nothing. Option 2, build more stops at the county line rather than just Newburgh, you know, to go from Mequon to Newburgh to Germantown, put a stop in Germantown. Option 3, do an MOU with Washington County to allow each county to run rides into the other counties and deadhead there. And lastly, a full merger. We went over the options and discussed them at length. There was various estimates. Jason Whittick was there as well, the former transit superintendent, and Jason, our super administrator, was there as well.
He only in spirit.
Oh, yeah, spirit. That's right. You weren't there. That's right. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. You were somewhere else, but I did meet your wife that day, so that was nice. So it's been estimated this could be 6,000 to 8,000 rides a year, potentially, and the cost impact ranged from Joy and Jason's estimate of, $10,000 to $50,000 cost. It would cost us that to provide a service through an MOU to deadhead rides into Washington County, but nobody knows for sure. Again, there was a fair amount of reasons not to form a transit commission, which is what would be required statutorily to operate a joint county, a 2-county transit service. And after kicking around all of the options, it pretty much came down to what actually is John's favorite option, the MOU. That to pilot, and call it a pilot, and try this and see what the demand really is for this service. Because that's one of the unknowns. I think that, some of the points that have been discussed here all along is that this isn't going to be a cost savings endeavor, regardless of how you slice it, to merge these entities. The whole idea is providing better service to our residents, which is going to cost some money. We talked about adding, obviously, fees and maybe relatively significant fees to to ride into Washington County because of the deadhead expense and so forth. So there was also discussion of a sewer Pac study that was done, and John sent that out to Pat and I have it teed up to send to the rest of the committee to read through. A very interesting report, and if anything, solidified the discussion and the thinking about not doing an MOU, at least, not doing a full merger of the two counties. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's, I think the meeting's over, but, so based on that, you know, there was going to be an effort to re-engage Sewer Pac for possibly an updated analysis of the current situation, and then also how long would it take to put together an MOU to provide to Washington County? The timetable seemed to be a couple of months, right? We were talking about something like that. So then I reached out a couple days later to Josh Hubin over at Washington County, the county executive, and talked with him about this. We had talked previous to the meeting, and he wanted to know what the update was coming out of the meeting. And I told him that he could expect an MOU in the coming months as a pilot program, and he was receptive to it, more positive than he was when we talked before the meeting. I explained the rationale and what we were thinking and why, and he said, okay, we'll look for that and see what we can do. So that's where that stands. Any questions, discussion, input, correction?
Just a couple of comments. First, thanks for inviting me to that meeting. I felt, as you did, it was very productive in beginning to understand the pluses and minuses. Second of all, Jason Wittig isn't here, but I would like to thank him because he did bring up this 12-page memo that was done by Sewer Pac. And then, John, I asked and you sent it to me. I probably spent a couple of hours going through this and, trying to break it out. I have to tell you, I have a lot of confidence in Sewer Pac. I tease them a little bit about being a little slow on schedule, but they have historically been the gold standard as far as transit and transportation planning. I mean, if they say it, it's pretty good. I see both of you are moving. So as I went through this, I must be honest, Mr. Chairman, it raised some concerns. I mean, I'm seeing, if I just could, I'm seeing potential cost increases of $60,000 to $137,000 if we went full bore, depending on if you get funds.
Full merger, you mean?
Yeah. And then the other thing that, I got to tell you, jumped out at me, they're saying if you do this and you want to maintain quality of service and level of service, you probably are going to have to buy a couple of vehicles. So, and their logic is, this will be attractive, and in all possible data, they ran some, what I call O&D studies, it'll probably be at peak times.
Yeah.
So, if you do it, everybody's going to say this is wonderful, and they're all going to want to do it probably between 3 and 6, or 6 and 8 in the morning, so you're not going to have enough vehicles. And they're talking about like $100,000 for 3 vehicles or something on that order, and they're saying Easy does it. Don't know if you could get funding. So now I'm thinking, our budget, we don't know yet. You think things are in good shape, but
we'll do.
Yeah, but I'm a little concerned about, even if we do a pilot project, we'd have, in order to keep level of service, we'd have to go buy some vehicles. And I'm not saying, I'm just saying that's concerning me. And then the more I read this, the more I think, I don't know, is this a good time to do a pilot study? Because I think ridership has changed because of the problems that we have.
I mean, outside of public health and, Wasada things, I don't think there's been another area of county service that's been more impacted by the coronavirus.
Well-
Than transit operations.
Yeah.
No, I would agree. I can't think of, besides the obvious ones.
Yeah.
So as you begin to put these things, I had not, Mr. Chairman, I had not read this before the meeting, and as I thought it through, I like the idea of not giving up because it's an important service to our citizens, but the flip side is, I don't know if we run a pilot test, if this would be a good time period, 2 years. I mean, unemployment hasn't stabilized yet, the economy hasn't stabilized yet. So I'm just kind of running up yellow flags. And I'll leave it there, Mr. Chairman.
Well, any other comments?
Well, as I spoke last time, once you start this, and you're just talking Washington County, somebody's gonna say, why aren't you in Sheboygan County? Why aren't you in Milwaukee? Why can't we go to Milwaukee County?
Why doesn't that one? That'd be one reason.
People ask, why can't we go
They're
there?
actually looking at creating one, but they do not have a shared ride countywide taxi.
I don't mind if somebody does, pilot it to see, but I agree with you. This is not the time to be testing, because your numbers are gonna be way off. The guy who did this for 20 years, this is just a process controller, no. Your numbers are not gonna be what the real numbers are.
So the thought that I'm hearing is that it might be a good idea, we could develop an MOU but not implement it at this time because of the change due to the coronavirus, is that what you guys are saying?
Well, I just don't think, yes, I would agree, I like your words, the data won't be stable.
Your ridership, flip that around, you'd also be maybe a chance to test it without as much demand, right? So you might not have a huge influx of everybody saying, oh, I want to ride to Washington County.
Yes.
It might let you just, does this logistically work? Can we do it without maybe having to add the cars right away? I don't know what kind of agreement we'd have to make, but if this is, look, we're doing a pilot for 60 days, 90 days, then you know, you can always pull back.
Yeah, I think they were talking about a 2-year pilot.
Yeah, it was first, that's what I heard.
And I would,
Years as a pilot.
yeah, I think that's been a long, and we've had some debate on that, so, I agree with you that it might actually be the opportune time to test it without a lot of financial impact, because ridership will be low, and see if
It would give you an average of the financial cost. Some rides would be more expensive, some would be less, and then you'd average it out, you'd be your average.
We talked about, one of the things that was also discussed is that Washington County has a different fee service. They pay per mile, and here we're zones, and we're talking about changing to mileage, a mileage-based service instead as well. And then, also the discussion was in Washington County, you'd probably want to divide Washington County into zones of some sort. So, okay, it's so many miles to the border, that's your fee there. And then if we go into zone 1, it's plus X, zone 2 plus Y, plus zone 3 plus Z, because we have to offset some of those costs, because it will be significant to drive it, especially way over to the western side of Washington County and Deadhead. One of the things that was interesting to me is that I also learned that we have a fantastic transit service covering the entire county. Most counties, even Waukesha County, is my understanding, does not have a...
I believe so. I think they have a city of Waukesha, but they do not have a Waukesha County.
And I believe their county operates a bus, like an express bus, but they don't have a shared ride taxi service.
So we have an enviable service that we're even talking about taking up to another level. I would be in favor of continuing to pursue this and put together an agreement and see if we can come to some terms with Washington County based on a pilot and see what happens.
And again, today is purely a discussion. There is no action coming down today, so.
Well, and not to confuse the issue even more, but, there may be significant changes to our express bus service.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So there'll be an opportunity to maybe shift some funds around without increasing costs, depending on what happens with the express bus. So, right now, Milwaukee County Transit has, I don't know if they've given us a date where they anticipate.
No, just to remind everyone, our contractor for our express bus is MCTS, the Milwaukee County Transit Services. Sometime around March, April, they shut down our express rider with joint agreement with us that the ridership wasn't there. We had seen a decline in ridership over the last couple of years anyways. So with the coronavirus pandemic, it really started dropping, so we shut down the whole service. To this point, there's been discussions about if and when that's going to start back up, but nothing has been set in stone as of yet, so.
So I guess I would like to spend just a minute or two. I still support the idea of a pilot plant, but I don't know about a 2-year pilot plant. I think that maybe we should crop the, okay, so I see the chairman moving his head up and Dave is too. Yeah, I think that has, when we left it, the discussion was that your staff, the transit, would sit down and try to write a scope for that MOU, so we'd have something more tangible. But could we agree, and we're not voting, but maybe we should crop the length of that pilot study a little bit?
Definitely. I thought a year was the maximum amount, and I know that 2 years kept coming up and getting pushed back, and we need longer term. I disagree with that. I think we could go even shorter than a year and get an idea of what's going on.
I support that 100%.
Except to say you're probably in for a penny, you're in for a pound. But it may be, if it's well received, and we do know transit generally fills a vacuum whenever we've expanded services. The ridership fills in those expansions, so.
Yeah. Transit Superintendent Nielsen's off for about a month, and so the goal is when she's back, we'll go over, we'll start prepping this, and when we bring something forward to the committee for action, we can have some options on there as far as length.
And the second thing that Jason brought up, when you say express bus,
Yep.
do you mean three-way flyer?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
I
That is one of the, that comes down to a policy decision. Do you want to be in that business? But that's a whole different thing. If you want to be in, fixed route transit. On my view of the world, that's not an easy, you got to talk that through.
For sure.
Oh, okay.
For sure, yeah. And we're probably wandering. Yeah.
And
we're probably wandering a little far away from the agenda item, but, I think suffice to say, that discussion was coming pre-COVID, because of the ridership decreases that we've seen over the last couple of years. So, I don't know what the long-term impact of telecommuting, these are transit riders that are choosing to ride the bus. So I think there's a big policy nugget up there.
Just to put a bow on that one, as I said, I don't want to go too far afield, but just to put a bow on it, Superintendent Nielsen is aware. She is starting to do research into how different directions would impact transit as a whole, and so that will be coming before the committee at some point.
So that could, why don't we put that on a future agenda?
You're ready to throw something at me.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, we'll put it, I think when the superintendent is back from her leave, we'll put that on an agenda for some discussion and lay out a policy document for the committee to understand.
So, we're not voting, we're looking for some type of recommendation that instead of a 2-year MOU.
No, this is purely a discussion item, so this is just a back and forth.
No, I agree that it should be shorter.
Okay, so noted.
So on just one last question from my standpoint on the express bus, just curiously, we've stopped a service. Has there been any pushback? Has there been any, when are you going to start this up again? What's going on? How can we,
I'm not sure if Joy has received any calls. I have not.
I know of people who used to ride the flyer that are working at home and, are really enjoying it, actually. So, yeah.
It was really a convenient service for people to travel from Ozaki County to downtown Milwaukee.
Right. Okay.
Coming in August.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good discussion. Thank you, everybody, for your input. The financial report, Mr. Edgman, for transit.
Anything on financials for transit?
Nowhere's where it used to be, so I guess.
Okay, great. Highways, number 7, discussion items. The Highway Commissioner statutory responsibility, Supervisor Marchese has requested that in continuation of our overview of this committee's responsibilities, that we look at these two specific individual responsibilities. So take it away, Mr. Ashman.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk a whole lot here. It's more of just if you were really bored at night and wanted to read through some very long and deep state statutes. The Highway Commissioner position really is an interesting one. I often talk about that there are 72 counties in the state, and we do things 72 different ways. The same can be said about states. There are 50 states, and I think there are 50 different ways of doing things. So where many states will have DOTs with their own equipment and their own regions, what Wisconsin kind of fell into early in the 1900s was they looked and they said, hey, we're starting to form this highway road system everywhere. Counties, you guys already have equipment, you already have that, so we're just going to contract with each individual county. So you're doing your county roads, and then you can keep doing their state roads. So annually, we have a contract with the state. It's called the RMA, or Routine Maintenance Agreement, and that's about $1.2 million, and that's for us to do asphalt repair, concrete repair, mowing, and snow plowing and salting and that type of thing. And so out of then the state statutes, they created a highway commissioner for each county to kind of oversee that highway system. And so, again, over time, a lot of things change. It used to be fully an elected position. Then it kind of became an appointed position. In our county, it's been changed to an appointed position by the administrator. But it's an interesting proposition from a standpoint of, I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a snapshot of some of the different things that are responsible, so I don't know if anyone has any questions. The only one I was going to mention, I know specifically one of the last ones, the one on the bottom of the page of 16, is managed town road bridge aid request. That actually will be coming up to you very soon. We haven't had a town road bridge aid request in probably 15 to 20 years. But the way the state statutes read is that if you as a county have done one before, you have to continue that program. And the way the program works is basically a township can get a large culvert or a bridge paid 50%, I'll say in essence, by the other townships within the county. Now, where a county comes in is the county is the agent to pay that half, that other half to the township that's doing the work, and then collects the monies from the other townships for that project. So, I know the town of Cedarburg has let me know that they're going to be requesting that soon, and I'm going to have a meeting with their administrator here this week to just kind of go over what I understand of the process, and then I'll need to get Rhonda Gordon involved, our court counsel as well, because it's something that I am not altogether too familiar with. But, like I said, I don't know if there were any specific questions over statutory responsibilities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you pointed out, to me, this is overview for us to do our job. I kind of look at it from the perspective of, by statute, and Jason, you got to correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this committee is also the highway.
Correct.
And so we have incredible responsibilities. And I hate to say this, but it gets into the weeds like who's going to pay for picking up litter along our highways, and that our constituents call and complain about that, because that contract that we execute with DOT is very specific, and they are not always appreciative of our financial situation. If you know what I mean. So the other thing is, John is the highway commissioner who gets direction from Jason. But the highway commissioner has incredible power.
You know that?
I mean, he can buy equipment. He does not statutorily need our approval. The county board might impose, but as you begin to forward look, that part of this committee's responsibilities and John's especially as we, I'm not going off agenda here, but if you start talking about transit in, transit out, that's a big policy issue that you're gonna be in the middle of. So I thought it'd be good for the newer members to just kind of walk you through that. And if, there's only just one thing I want to read out of the statute. So the statute says that...
Can you reference the statute?
It's chapter 83, and it is section 83.01, Highway Commissioner. And it says, duties, except as provided blah, 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 the Highway Commission shall have charge under the direction of the Highway Committee, the construction and maintenances of all highways, blah, blah, blah. And it says, in any county with the Highway Commissioner appointed, the Highway Committee shall be only a policy-making body determining the broad outlines and principles governing the administration, and the county highway commissioner shall have the administrative powers and duties prescribed by this committee. I'm bringing that up is because I believe in the next, under your leadership, in the next term, you're going to have 2035 coming, 2050 coming. You're going to have a lot of major data coming out of the, what's called the MPO, that is going to filter through John to us. So I don't want to overstate it, but it's really a big responsibility that we have to represent our constituents with the leadership we have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Yeah, I actually printed it out.
I'd like to somehow get a copy or have that in the minutes or something, that little paragraph you read about how, you know, we're policy making broad, you know, whatever, I can't remember exactly how that was put, but I'd like to have that.
Yeah, section 83.015, it says county highway committees, and it's it's 2 powers and duties, and it's subsection B. So it's right here. I can give it to Julie for the quote.
Okay, wonderful,
Thank you.
Any other comments on highway commissioner duties or responsibilities? And one question, John.
Yeah.
So this town road bridge aid policy doesn't cost the county any money, but we're the agent?
I don't believe so. Again, I need to research it more, but I know that what I did see is it says if you've done it before as a county, you're on the hook to continue that program. And I know that we have done it in the past. We talked about this one for the town of Cedarburg probably 4 years ago, and they've never submitted for it, so.
But now it's coming.
Now it's coming.
Okay. All right, so you'll keep us updated.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, and then the county surveyor.
So similarly, within that, we also have the county survey system. Now, that's something that a lot of people don't think about, don't deal with. But every quarter mile, there are monuments in every direction, northeast, southwest, and those monuments are used by surveyors, developers, and businesses, and we use them to know where our lots are and where our property lines are when there are discrepancies, or when someone yanks that little pipe out of the corner of your yard and says, no, it's supposed to be 5 feet farther that direction. And so historically, there's always been a county surveyor. Previously, before I had started with the county, there was a gentleman by the name of Mark Banton who was a county surveyor. He retired. When he retired, at that time, Bob Drebel, my predecessor, who also was a civil engineer and a county surveyor, took on the title of county surveyor, but didn't have the staff and the ability to do the work. So back in around 2012, 2013, we hired Sewer Pac. And for about $52,000, $53,000 a year, they officially serve now as our county surveyor. And they will submit a report to us every January that looks over the amount of monuments they've placed, how many they've fixed, and that type of thing. So again, I'm fascinated by that, because when you look back at some of our records, it will refer to the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, that I picture guys just out in the middle of these fields with a long chain and can't think of the word offhand, basically the surveying instrument to make sure they're looking at a straight line, and they're just wandering through the world at that time, just into the middle of nothingness to put in these monuments, and it amazes me how close to accurate they are now, comparatively to the equipment we have now.
So, again, Mr. Chairman, I asked that this be put on. There's a couple of things. The technology and the equipment that is used is spectacular now as far as accuracy. And what a lot of people should understand, those corners and establishing their coordinates is extensively used by the Register of Deeds. That all fits together. Everything that the Regional Planning Commission does and the Register of Deeds does is absolutely linked. By the way, I really like the idea of doing sewer pack, because I think they do almost every county. I don't, in the region, yeah. So that's piece one. Second thing is, who does construction surveys? And the reason I'm bringing it up, because the equipment costs a lot of money. So if you're not, Public Works used to do construction surveys.
So like a post-construction survey after the construction is done?
You're going to do a layout, or you're going to do a plan? You used to have an on-staff surveyor that would do, I don't know.
Most of what we do, we don't do a lot with survey. Most of what we do, we have our own asphalt plant, so we do a lot of overlay. So what we'll typically do is we may mill down 2 inches and put 2 inches back in, or we may, we do minor work, or if we are doing more of a pulverized road, we may take some shots and just kind of create a center line along that. We don't do a lot of survey ourselves. If it's for a contractor, then typically that's where we're hiring the design engineer to do the survey and the design, and then they bid out those plans for the contractor. The contractor does it and has either the engineer or their own staff to do the staking for that project.
So 2 years ago, there was a request that Parks and Planning wanted to buy surveying equipment.
Correct.
And what happened?
It was put in as part of a kind of an additional request. They utilize that GPS to help locate, I believe it's the POWTS systems, that helps them locate where septic systems can be placed, should be placed, where they are placed. And so they had put in a proposal to do that. Now again, they don't have a full-time use for it, so what they said is, hey, Planning and Parks could use it as well, because Planning and Parks has kind of a small little small little GPS that they do some basic ditch surveying with. We occasionally borrow that if we're looking to do some ditch grades, because a very common request is, hey, my ditch doesn't flow. Okay, we'll get out there, we'll take some shots and let you know, well, we can regrade this ditch, but it's going to be 2 feet deeper, or, those type of things. So we use it occasionally. So they had put in that request, but it was never approved.
Well, what I'm after is, again, that's a function that I believe the county must have. But I don't like 10 different departments buying real expensive survey equipment. Historically, it was Public Works. And if you wanted a survey, you called Public Works, they had the latest equipment, then you'd have like, what I call interdepartmental charges. And I always thought that worked real well. And that's the only reason I'm bringing it up. Those are the kind of things I believe very strongly in organizational centralization if it's cost effective. Having 10 people with pieces of equipment and everybody running around is counterproductive.
So Planning and Parks has surveying equipment that they've procured through their fish passage work, and then that's the equipment that Highway uses, and Andy Hostbach's team uses when it's needed. So we do have that centralized.
Do we have a registered surveyor on staff? No. We don't have a licensed surveyor?
Rob Mary, who works for Sewer Pack, is officially named as the county
I got
surveyor.
it. That's for lost and obliterated corners, is what that's for.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we did talk, at least in last year's budget, about should we contract with Sewer Pack to expand their surveying services, at which point I posed the question to John, if we're gonna pay them more, would we be better off having our own, taking those monies and having our own surveyor in-house? So, I think ultimately that was kind of pushed aside in the budget process, but.
So the reason these are issues, you gotta know that those are statutes that this commission, Highway Commission, is responsible for. All that stuff's gonna come at us in the budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, didn't that also come up, the register of deeds? Didn't they have the equipment to do that? Because Ron Volt, when he came to our meetings for the natural resource, always talked about they wanted to upgrade.
So I think they had a GPS.
They do things with GIS. I'm not aware of them doing any field work with
So
GPS.
I think it was kind of one of those backpack GPS units that they might have been looking for. So that also, I believe, we have some in planning and parks.
My bottom line is, even though I know the equipment's gotten a lot better, the property in my backyard has been surveyed 3 times in the last 12 months. Between my stake and Bob Tillman's stake, there's still 7 feet.
Which one did you pound at?
I got it right in my backyard. I got stakes and everything running right across it. I know what Bob's doing, but.
But the equipment is not $10. It's not like the old days. You could go to Ace Hardware and, buy a little television. It's a little more sophisticated now.
So is there anything here that we should put on a future agenda for discussion as far as interdepartmental and, hiring in-house?
Not at this time. Again, not to go too far afield, I will just fill in a little bit because you did ask about the registered surveyor. So, again, when Banton retired in 2012, Bob took those roles, they hired Sewer Pack. Eventually, they hired me as the assistant and as the predecessor or as the successor to Bob Dreblow as the commissioner. When Bob retired and I succeeded as the commissioner, we looked at a position and we officially termed it a project technician / surveyor. We looked at, and when I interviewed people, we had a couple registered land surveyors that came in and interviewed for the position. The issue was 90% of that position, who is currently served by Warren Gettle, our construction superintendent, 90% of that job is non-survey related. It's permits, it's roadway, it's inspection, it's dealing with the public. And so I couldn't justify the cost and the type of people I was looking at for the registered land surveyor that they didn't have any background in dealing with the public, dealing with permits, that type of thing. And so we hired Warren, and one of the benefits of Warren is a surveyor by trade. He is not a registered land surveyor. He has talked about getting his license, but it's nothing that's on the input right now. And so that's something that, again, it continues to discuss. As Jason mentioned, we've talked about the potential of it, but for right now, one more aside. So what he's talking about is we talked about in Sewer Pack, in their reports, what they'll basically say is they're replacing maybe 5% of monuments a year. They believe probably 3% are getting destroyed each year, and that's the main function of what they're doing. We had a discussion with them a few years ago that said, hey, could you really put a much higher level of effort in and try to say that we're going to look at all of the Mequon Township in 1 year, and all of Grafton in 1 year, and all of Cedarburg in 1 year, and try to do massive monument replacement so that maybe we're not chasing as much, that we're not finding, because a lot of what comes is they get a call from a contractor or a developer or a surveyor and says, hey, I'm trying to find this monument, and it's obliterated and gone. And there was a lot of work, I think he talks about it in here, there was a lot of work in the 90s where a lot of monuments are just gone now. And so now they kind of have to backtrack and solve them. So we did have that idea to say, what would an additional township per year where not only are you doing the reactive, but you're doing a proactive look. And that's where they came back and they said, well, it would probably be another 50 to 60 grand a year. That's where then we had some discussions of, well, does it make sense to then, if you're paying that much, to just look at another staff person? But again, we didn't get too far into it. It's something that we've kind of said, budgetarily, it's nothing that's truly affecting us right now, so we've kind of punted on that. And again, anytime shared equipment, staffing, or anything would need to come up, that'll come up through the budget and be a discussion item at that point.
My only question, that 53,000, is that like a time and material? Is that how they do this time and material wise, or is that a lump sum and whatever they do, they do?
Lump sum, whatever they do, they do.
Okay.
I would say, I feel we get a lot of work for that 53,000.
We'll strike that from the public record. No. Next item would be the highway financial report.
Any questions on financial reports?
I just had one on the internal, internal service fund highway department. The purchase services, being at 3 times annual budget halfway through the year. Just curious as to what that was.
My guess is, and again, I would always need to verify, but my guess is that is contractor for the County Trunk Highway LL concrete reconstruction, the pavement project we did up there. Because we're hiring a contractor, we don't necessarily always have an exact number, or that fits in under construction, and potentially when our financial analyst is inputting this, that's where she would put it. But I'll confirm that that's the case, and if it's not, I'll come back. But my assumption is that that is the County Trunk Highway concrete reconstruction project that we bid out.
All right. Very good. Anything else? Okay. The item number 2, Public Works Department project status report from John.
So just a couple other items on there. Just to give you an update, approved the HISSUP NN and Y traffic signals. We are moving forward with that. We've requested statement of qualifications from 10 firms. Those will come back in early August. There's a review panel of, my construction superintendent, Warren Gettle, will be on it. I've also asked the town of Cedarburg administrator, since this intersection is in the township, to be on that review committee. We'll get those back, we'll review those, we'll create a ranking list that then we'll present to the committee in August for discussion and approval. The next step after that is once we get approval of that ranking, we push that onto the DOT, and when they finalize their state municipal agreement, then we can continue moving forward on that. I would do, again, quick side note, along NN, I have had discussions in the past with the DOT on County Trunk Highway NN and a program that the DOT runs called the High Risk Rural Roads Program, or better known as the HRRRP. And what they're looking at is, traditionally with highway engineering, it's I'll say a little bit of a morbid way to do things, but we do fixes where we have fatalities, where we have issues. I get lots of calls from people that say, oh, you got to do something in my intersection, that's the worst intersection. Well, I look, there's 2 accidents in 5 years. Well, they're all near misses. You just got to do it. Well, I would have those everywhere, and I can't reconstruct every intersection everywhere, so we do often do it based on fatalities and significant injuries. One of the things some state DOTs are doing, and the Wisconsin DOT is starting to get into this, is they're starting to look at types of roads where they see a consistent problem. So they look at roads with vertical curves, horizontal curves, those type of things. And so they approached me back in the winter and said, hey, we have some interest in looking at a county highway. And so we talked, and they ended up selecting County Trunk Highway NN. So they've done a study, and they've looked at along County Trunk Highway NN from 5 corners all the way to the Washington County line. And they've said, hey, we think this would potentially fit within the HRRRP program. They've done an initial study looking at accidents and that type of thing, and they're saying, we potentially, if we apply, and this is what will be coming up in August, if we apply, they would have another HISSUP grant for us to do some kind of general safety factors around NN. Things such as centerline rumble strips, side rumble strips, additional chevrons where you have curves, additional signage where you have vertical curves, those type of things. All in all, it's probably about a $300,000 to $400,000 full project cost for engineering, design, and construction. And again, if we would submit and if we were to be selected, it would be a 90-10. So it would be 10% Ozaukee County funds, 90% DOT funds. So I just do that as a little sideline that NN obviously has the traffic signals going, but it is an area that's also being recognized as another potential.
And that's based on just the analysis of the road itself, not necessarily accidents or fatalities.
Well, no, a little bit of both. A little bit of both. They kind of looked at the rate. They looked at how it. They looked at the vertical, horizontal curves. They looked at the where, and then they kind of compiled accidents along that and did some analysis. And I have a report I'll do as part of the agenda that they looked at, and they said, yep, it does have some high rates and that type of thing.
Is that something, John, at this point, if that's the case, you would want to do? Do you know at this point, applying for this and doing?
I probably would be, and then the application is in September, so that's why I'll be bringing this before the committee in August for discussion.
Thanks for the heads up.
And then otherwise, in the back is just the county and state construction update. If you're leaving here and want to check out our crews, we are hot and heavy right now on County Trunk Highway W, Port Washington Road, south of Target and Meyer. We did have, when we were milling out there, I am someone that likes to keep roads open as much as possible, especially for county highways, because we can't, without potential liability, start pushing traffic onto local roads. So when I do detours, we have to detour on county and state highways. And so we attempted to do this stretch of W, which is a 2-inch mill, and then putting 2 inches back in from Pioneer Road all the way up to Opportunity Drive, just south of Meyer. We did the milling portion of it under traffic. Unfortunately, we had one youthful driver that was a little too anxious and caught one of our foremen with the side mirror, and that individual was then ticketed. He's our employee's fine. But then we had another driver, I believe an elderly woman, that lost concentration, lost focus, and veered off her lane into our skid steer. Luckily, no one was in the skid steer, but it damaged the entire front. So based on some recommendation from my patrol superintendent, Josh Borden, we did now create a detour, but what we've done is his idea, and it's working great, is we close northbound only, have them detouring from Pioneer or C onto 43 up to 60, but we're continuing to allow southbound traffic then, which got rid of a lot of the potential headaches by allowing traffic to come down to Meyer, come down to Target, that type of thing, and then if they want to continue south down to the hospital or to the south side of Mequon, they can. But then again, like I said, we have the northbound blocked off right now. So if you drive south through Port Washington Road, you can see our crews going today.
Okay, thank you. Any comments?
Question for me, Highway 57 and Fredonia Avenue, are they gonna be wrapping that up soon? I know it says mid-July, and that's what we were told by our Public Works Director at the village.
Sure. I believe so. I know I get a weekly 3-week update from them, and I know that they were coming close. I think they're putting the poles in right now, which I think is the last step. So I'd probably say, since we're already at mid-July, I'd say no, not mid-July.
Yeah.
But I would think by the end of July, it should be wrapped up.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
I had an update from the DOT regarding Highway 60. They are apparently ahead of schedule, and things are moving along out there. So, any other comments on this? I had one other item for an update, project status. We had, as you know, last meeting we had Justin here regarding the soccer field, and I've had a couple of conversations with our corporate counsel, and because we still owe him an official response whether they can or cannot police the area and throw people off, kick people off the grounds and so forth. We are attempting to put a meeting together, Jason, I, Rhonda, and Justin, to discuss this. Rhonda feels like there's a lot more. This isn't just a simple yes or no. On the one hand, right, the simple answer is no, they can't put people off, but there's a lot more involved in it than that. So we are continuing to pursue a solution and an answer here for it.
Fence looks nice though.
Fence is up.
Yeah, it looks great.
Although they should give you a schedule, their practice time, and their tournaments, and their...
Although I will say there's question on where they put it, because they actually requested for it along Sunset.
That's what I thought too.
They've installed a fence along
Yeah, 34.
Spring. Now, I don't, and I haven't talked to them, I've had other things, but my question has been whether they thought they could just put it up there because there already was like a timber fence along there, and whether or not they're still going to put another longer stretch along Sunset as well. And I just figured we would clarify that whenever we have the meeting with them at that point, so. It's in the ground at this point, so.
That's not a 5-foot fence, though, is it?
I think it's close.
Yeah, it looks like a 5-foot fence.
I thought it was shorter than that as well, but I saw someone standing next to it, and it's pretty
I think
close.
the topography and the a little bit off, the asphalt makes it look a little bit.
Yeah, that was something that they, I think, asked about last year, or talked about last year, and they're just now getting around to it. Again, you have some kind of low-lying areas in there, and so they had some tile inserted so they can drain those fields a little bit better.
Well, we will get back to the committee with an update on that once we have something figured out. Pardon me, Tom?
The meeting.
The meeting, yes. Anything else for today?
Move adjournment?
Moved by Supervisor Kennedy, seconded by Supervisor Haas. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, gentlemen.
Until next time. Tommy, you make it to tea time?
The only other question I have is,
There you go.
are we active